Hello and welcome to my channel, Haylee Marie Vintage. Today I'm really excited about the project I'm bringing you. These are two things that I am very excited to work with. First up is this lovely fabric, which is a cotton lawn from Style Maker Fabrics. I don't believe she sells this anymore, but as you can see, it's these really vibrant watercolor fruits. I love watercolor, I love fruit patterns, and I love really bright colors, so I think this is perfect. And while this won't come out till August, I am starting it in the middle of June. That way I can have it for as long of the Seattle summer as possible. Seattle has a relatively short summer compared to most parts in America, so it's important to me that I get this up and rolling. For the pattern, we're doing a playsuit. It has been a minute since I've done a playsuit on this channel, I think. I love a playsuit. I love the 3 pieces and how you can kind of mix and match. These are some of the things I use most when I travel. I love to travel with a playsuit because you have lots of great opportunity to mix and match, but also have a really coordinated set. So that is the plan for today. I think this is gonna be a really fun project. I'm really excited. With that, we're gonna go into me cutting out the pattern. So I'm first starting by cutting out my fabric. I am adding a little bit of waist to this. I'm adding about a 1/2 inch on the side seam allowances, so that'll give me a total of 2 inches around just waist in general. In general, this is what I add because it's easier to take it out than it is to obviously put it back in, as I have demonstrated in a recent video. This is a semi-directional print, so I mean in general you should cut on grain line. I've been seeing a lot of TikToks where people are like, cutting on grain line is propaganda, and I'm like, hate to break it to you, but if you want your clothes to wear a long time and not warp and do weird stuff in the wash, you do have to cut on grain. I didn't understand this when I first sew, and I'm not gonna lie to you, I occasionally will fudge a grain if I don't have quite enough fabric, but I'm very careful with the pieces that I do that with because how they warp will change. This one I had enough fabric, it's not really relevant, but yeah, I'm cutting all on grain, but I'm also cutting all like up down because this pattern is definitely an up down pattern. You can't really go both ways if that's something you would need to do to conserve fabric with this print. And right here is where I like to put my reminder that I do have a Patreon where you can go over and support me and get access to my videos Monday instead of Friday, I guess, so you can start off your week with enjoying my channel instead of seeing it on Friday. I always really appreciate the support I get from my patrons. They're awesome, and it's been a really cool experience to see that community grow and interact with them and all of that good stuff. And then pattern doesn't call for it, but this fabric is a tiny bit on the sheer side. So I am actually going to cut a lining for the blouse and the shorts because those are things that I don't want to have to wear things under, slash the top is cropped, so I can't wear like a slip with either of these essentially. So with the shorts and the top, those will be fully lined. And then the skirt, I'm not gonna line. So I'm really only cutting the bodice pieces for the top and the shorts. So I decided to start with the shorts first because a lot of times shorts are pretty easy to make and I wanted an easy win. So I am starting with these guys, and all I'm doing here is I am pinning and marking the tucks in the front, and then there is also a dart on the back, and I am doing that both on my outer pieces with the pattern, and then I will also be doing it on my lining fabric. And then I vehemently disagree with the order of operations in this pattern, but I decided to follow the instructions, even though I know how to make a pair of shorts and I could have not. They have you first sew up the inseam, which is wild in my opinion. Once I got the inseam sewed up, I decided to add my pocket here. I'm only doing a pocket on one side because the other side will have a zipper. And then again, in a wild order of operations, the pattern instructs you to then sew up the middle seam. So you've sewn up the inseam, you're sewing up the middle seam, and then very last you'll do the side seams. But the way this works, I always get like a little bit disoriented and I risk sewing things the wrong way. My preferred order of operations is like the middle crotch and butt seam, and then to sew the side seams, and then very last thing to sew is the inseam. I've found doing it this way, you have a better chance of like sewing the side seam on the wrong thing and making basically the pair of pants. I think it goes upside down when you do that. So yes, this is not my preference of order of operations. And usually I don't cut or like clip up the crotch and butt seam because it can weaken the seam, but because I have a lining here, I feel okay because I basically have 2 seams. I would have to split through 2 seams. I feel just in general better that I won't split the back, and I like from the measurements I can tell there's enough space in the back as well, so I am going to actually clip these so I can get a cleaner press when I press them open. And now finally they're having me do the side seams, and obviously the pocket is involved as part of this. And here I am actually sewing up those side seams. I feel like I haven't filmed from this view in a while, and I don't know why I stopped doing it. It wasn't really intentional because I forgot how enjoyable kind of this view is for me. Also, side note, I'm thinking about bedazzling my sewing machine. Give me your thoughts here. And with my layers still separate and my side seams together, I now can put in my zipper. So this, I am going to put the zipper in with like machine stitching just on the outer fabric. And just because it's easier when they're separated, I went ahead and I finished the hem. That way I will eventually press up. And here I am just pinning in my lining to the waistband area, kind of the top, and I'm going to baste that in around the top. And then here I am stitching the lining where I want it around the zipper, just by hand with like a simple slip stitch. This is how I prefer to do like a lined zipper. You can technically do it where you sew with the machine through both sides of the fabric, both the lining and the regular. I personally don't do that because I don't feel like I have the control, or I don't know if skill is the right word. It is not the easiest way for me to do this, and I end up often having to unpick and redo stuff. And if I do it this way, I know I'm one and done. And with that done, I'm now going to focus on the waistband itself. I just cut one long waistband and I figure out how to fit it to my garment once I sew up the garment because I changed my waist measurements. I only use the pattern piece to get the thickness that I need figured out. And then what I'm doing here is I'm using that roll of interfacing I got from Wawak, which has become, I think, one of my biggest sewing tool uses. I love this interfacing. Like for this project, because I didn't have to interface anything major, I just was able to pull out that roll and cut it and use it, and it was really, really great for that. I like my waistbands to be interfaced because while they will still wrinkle and kind of lump, they just look a little bit better wrinkling and lumping than if it's just the fabric by itself. You can get like really anti-wrinkle waistbands, but then for me, they get thick enough that they become uncomfortable. So this is like my happy middle ground. And then one thing I've just learned from sewing for a long time is that I really prefer to do all the pre-pressing for my waistband before I actually attach it. So that's folding it in half, pressing that, and then the part that I'm gonna like slip stitch on the inside, I like to press up that little like 1/2 inch ledge. And this is definitely just like for me a more successful method to do a waistband that saves me some pressing later and is just a lot easier to press when it's all flat. And here I'm attaching that waistband with the right sides together. Some patterns have you actually attach the right side to the wrong side of the fabric and then top stitch from the outside because that'll give you a nicer top stitch that way. I don't do it that way because I would always rather use a hand finish of a slip stitch. I think it looks nicer. I don't like top stitching unless I think a garment really is appropriate to have top stitching. So this is the method I prefer. And then I'm also going to sew in my label here after getting the waistband in. And now I am just pressing everything in place. And here I am doing that slip stitch of the waistband. Like I said, this is much my preferred method, and it's an especially great method when you have a lining, because if your waistband isn't pressed perfectly and actually goes over a little bit, you just slip stitch through lining and there's no stitches showing at all on the outside of your garment. And then after trying it on, I got a good idea about the length of the shorts that I wanted. I am actually trimming like 2 inches off the lining because obviously I want the lining to be shorter than the outer fabric because I don't want it to stick out the bottom. That would be weird. And then here, I'm actually going to just do a simple double turn hem. I am not going to do like a nicer hem here because again, this is a lining and the finish won't show on the outside of the garment. And it's not super surprising. I wanted these shorts a little bit shorter, so I'm cutting off about 1.5 inches. This is, again, really truly not surprising because generally patterns are pretty long on me because I'm not very tall. I think most patterns are drafted for somebody who's like 5'4", 5'5". Also, obviously their hemlines were just longer back then, even though like to me the illustration shows a pretty short hem in this. I was going to shorten them actually quite a bit more, and then I realized my inseam was like down to like a 1/2 inch, and nope, I did that when I was young. I will never do that again. So I did make it a little bit longer than actually I initially was going to after trying it on because I understand how inseams work, and yeah. And then I again sewed like 1 turn over, and then for my second turn I am again going to slip stitch it down just because I don't like the way a double turn hem looks at all. That is not my preferred finish. I would rather put in the time to slip stitch this down, which is what I'm going to actually do off camera. Now it is a new day and I am moving on to the skirt. First thing I'm doing is I'm using a pretty faded pen to just draw a line where the fold is, so that way I know exactly what I'm placing my interfacing against. I'm trying a new camera angle here. I think I've decided I don't like it, but you're always welcome to give your thought. Doing a straight above camera in this case, but it makes it pretty clunky for me to move around my table and you get a lot of head blockage. So I think I'm going to go back to kind of the more angled camera that I was doing before because it's just a lot less in my way, and I think I actually can get better shots from that. But yeah, here I am just getting a good press, getting the interfacing attached, and then I'm going to fold it where the fold line is and get a really good press there, because I just think it's always great to start by getting all the folds that you need pressed. It's not that dissimilar to what I do in like a waistband situation. And then here I'm real quick sewing just again one turn, and this here is just the flap. This just finishes the edge of kind of like that folded over flap that was going to make the button placket. And the skirt has pleats instead of darts, so I'm going to do those pleats. These pleats are actually like a very, very closed pleat. So you start out by basting down a few inches. You'll eventually take these basting stitches out, so that way you don't like pull the pleats apart too much as you sew the rest of the garment. Other instructions will call for a soft pleat, and this is very much not a soft pleat because of all the ironing and kind of stitching you're doing to make sure the pleats are super sharp. And here I am getting that really, really crisp press that I'm talking about. It's interesting, the back of the skirt doesn't have any pleats. It doesn't have any darts even. It's just a straight up back seam. So that's why I've sewn here. And because this is the only one that is not going to be fully lined, I'm going to pink these seams to finish them. And then I am planning to have pockets in this skirt. So here I am just starting the process for these pockets. I'm not going super in depth on the pocket process in this case because I do it in a lot of videos, and I have enough steps going on with this project without going into detail on this. Here I am paying the spooky tax before I get to sewing. I love it when she sits up on the top of my machine, although I love it a little bit less when she wants a ton of attention and headbutts me from up there because it's very distracting. But here I'm just sewing up those side seams on that skirt with the pockets and all that good stuff. And with that, we're ready to size the waistband. Again, I only use the width of the pattern piece, and I cut just a big length of strip for the waistband. And then before I cut that down, I pin it into the skirt to get exactly how long I want the waistband to be. It does like technically cause a little bit of waste. For me, it makes sure that the waistband fits. And if the waistband isn't like something that's special and kind of rounded and it's just a flat rectangle, I see no reason to give yourself the like benefit of not having like a super set waistband width, especially because like I like to do my fastener a specific way that requires often a little bit longer of a waistband than the pattern calls for, because I like to do a little flap that I put the button on, and then that kind of like goes a little bit towards the front and you button it. A lot of vintage patterns, when you buy them, the waistband piece will be thrown away, or not like a lot, but like it's to me the most common like pattern pieces that are missing are facings and waistbands. And I think it's because there's like lots of people who they have their own methods for doing facings and waistbands, so they don't keep the pattern piece, which is a little bit wild to me because I've never even thought about throwing a pattern piece away. But also these are patterns that have existed for like 50 years plus, versus obviously probably the first person who used these, they had existed and like bought them new or whatever. But I'm doing the waistband here exactly the same way that I did the waistband for the pair of shorts. So I've just done that on the machine fairly off camera, all the folding, all the pressing, and here I am just doing the final press to get it all ready to slip stitch. And I'm trying to save up all my hand sewing to the end, so I'm not going to slip stitch that now, but I am going to put in the buttons. I'm just using my buttonhole foot on my machine. Nothing super exciting here. Although, of course, on the very, very top button, I ran out of thread, or I can't remember, something glitched, and I had to unpick the buttonhole, and unpicking buttonholes is truly the worst thing ever, so I was not super thrilled. I also remembered at this point that I hadn't stuck in my label yet, so I'm doing that here. And then my next step is to figure out the hem length I want. So first thing that I've done is I've just folded over to get my clean edge like I always do. And then here, because it's technically kind of a more rounded hem, I'm putting in my basting stitches so I can ease this on the ironing board, which is what you see me doing here. I like to do this because it makes it way easier to not get those little tiny tucks and pleats that are really common when you have kind of a wider hem here. And I like a wider hem. I like, first of all, that kind of like when you swish around, you can see the like right side of the print for a little bit, and you're less likely to see like the actual hemline. If this piece gets passed on to someone else, there's a really easy way for them to take down the hem if they are taller than me, which chances are they are. So that's some of the reasons I do this. Alrighty, I have a lot of hand sewing to do on this skirt, so while I chat, I'm going to be doing the waistband here, sewing this down from the inside, and then I have the hem here, which I will also be slip stitching down, and then I also need to do all of the buttons, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8. So I have quite a bit of work ahead of me on the hand sewing, and I don't have that much media to talk about, so I'm sure I will be doing a lot of this while not chatting. I am, as far as reading, I'm still working my way through the Wicked Lovely series, still enjoying it. I have made it through book 3 and now I'm on to book 4. So far, book 4 is not maybe my favorite. I'm only 7 chapters in, so that could change. The characters in it, I don't like their point of view as much as the characters in the prior books. But yeah, no, I'm on 4 out of 5, so I'll probably wrap up this series soon and finish something else up. Really excited to see where this series ends. I feel like there's a lot of possibilities. I've been thoroughly enjoying the world. I think these characters will have a chance to grow on me, but definitely the first 3 books, the characters' like point of view that it's told from, I was much more enraptured a lot earlier. So yeah, that's where I am with reading. And then I have been watching movies. I've been kind of in a movie mood of watching like a movie kind of at maybe the end of my day or on like a Friday or whatever. I watched Secrets of Moon Acre the other day. It is on Fandango at home for free, so you can watch this movie completely for free. It was fine. I watched it because I read somewhere that the costuming was cool, and I will agree, I really enjoyed the costume. I really enjoyed the set design. Even the plot itself, I didn't mind. The plot is pretty cliche, but like that doesn't really bother me. But none of the characters were likable. Like none of them. I truly did not like a single one of them. They were all pretty annoying. It's definitely like a children's movie. So I'm not like the prime audience, but there are a lot of other children's movies that do a good job making a movie for both kids and adults, and I would say this is not one of them. Oh, also the acting was really bad. And the acting is really bad if I notice the acting is bad, because I don't really notice bad acting that often. Since it's free, if you have time and you like pretty costumes and pretty sets, I think it's worth watching. I would never pay to watch it, and like I probably won't ever watch it again because none of the costumes were compelling enough. Actually, I really liked, there's a scene where she's in her stays and chemise and drawers that I think her costume there is really cute. They use some really interesting prints. That's the only one I would ever like vaguely consider cosplaying, and I don't think I'm interested in cosplaying it as much as I am in just making something similar. Definitely got me inspired to maybe use some pattern fabrics for those things instead of the plain white that is fairly traditional. And then it is the 50th anniversary of Jaws is what I am being told by Peacock. So I did watch Jaws for the first time. I've seen lots of clips from Jaws. I went to a church with a pastor who really liked to pull movie clips, and I feel like he pulled movie clips from Jaws a lot. Like I feel like I've seen all of my Jaws clips in church, which is kind of funny. It was a good movie. I was actually kind of surprised how much I enjoyed Jaws because I thought Jaws was kind of thriller horror, and I would put it in thriller maybe more than horror. It's like a similar space as like Sinners or something like that, where it's not hardcore horror, but it's not horror, and there is gore and stuff like that. But I would say it's like a little bit more campy. Lots of practical effects. It's funny because I feel like I actually know a lot about like the making of Jaws and some of the different accidents that happened on set and stuff more than, and like I've just never actually like seen the movie all the way through, and I just was surprised at it had, I mean I shouldn't be surprised because I found out from watching this movie that it is from a book, so it's not surprising, but I thought it was really interesting on how it kind of touches on socioeconomical class discrepancies and conflict, and I enjoyed that. I will say I enjoyed everything until like the final 25 minutes where they're all on the boat hunting the shark. I'm definitely not an action movie watcher. I like the politics and the characters and the plot, but like I'm not super interested in watching like a really long war scene or anything like that. So I actually fell asleep during the final scene of Jaws, and I woke to the end and I was mildly confused. I feel like I also know quite a bit about Jaws because of Mythbusters. Mythbusters did an episode just checking some of the different myths around Jaws. On like what was actually possible. But yeah, no, I enjoyed the movie a lot more than I kind of expected to. I kind of put it on just because I hadn't seen it, and I feel like it's a good summer flick, and it's a classic flick, and I see it's to me it's very much a classic for a reason, which surprised me because yeah, I don't necessarily think of Jaws as a movie I enjoyed as much as I did. 2 or 3 weeks I think into Love Island, so we're halfway through Love Island right now. When I'm checking in, I have been watching that every night. I'm just watching USA. I know UK is going to. I've been very much enjoying seeing the discourse I've been seeing. I think I just have a really different perspective on reality TV than a lot of people. real. I believe a lot of people on reality TV are amping it up for cameras and it isn't necessarily real. And also that like the character flaws that they show you on TV is like not really a fair depiction of them because it's all in the edit, right? Like they're filming like 24 hours a day and we're seeing that condensed into an hour. It's always really interesting how real it seems people think reality TV is. The end of this week, they're like after show, they like begged you to stop harassing players, which I fully agree with. You should never be, I call them players because I think of it as a sport. You shouldn't be harassing people on reality TV. You don't know them. You don't know anything about them. And I feel like I think about that a lot as like a weird kind of public figure on YouTube. Like realistically, you guys don't know me. You only know the edited version I put out on myself. And reality TV is like that, except for these people have no control over their own edit and they don't really have autonomy in that. Like they absolutely sign up for it, but I don't believe people really understand what they're signing up for in certain ways because of how the general public reacts and how much like people send death threats and stuff like that. So if you ever are tempted to shoot a reality star a nasty message, please don't. I don't think anyone who watches my channel would be the type of person to do that. These people don't have control over their edit. They do have control over their actions, but again, you're seeing such a small snippet of who they are and it's not fair to judge them on that. Yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on Love Island right now. I've been enjoying it. Kind of, I don't know. It's like not my favorite show ever, but it's not my, like I still watch it, so I clearly like it enough. I've been slowly working my way. I've kind of been back on a Criminal Minds kick, which is another one of like kind of my nostalgia rewatch shows when I just kind of want something on the TV and I don't want to think about what's on TV. And it's really funny because like definitely when I'm watching shows like Criminal Minds, and I've talked before too about watching shows like kind of these propaganda shows, Bones, and how much like I enjoy these shows, and for me they're nostalgia, but it's really interesting like watching them back as somebody who now has a greater understanding of like the justice system and different like complications in the justice system. And like definitely in a lot of these shows you see the protagonists doing a lot of stuff that is illegal. I find myself being like, no, they deserve due process, even if you like know it's the bad guy in this TV show. But like I don't believe that law enforcement has any business being like judge, jury, and executioner. And so it is funny watching these shows sometimes because I'm like, no, you need like a legitimate warrant, or like you're provoking that person to attack you and then he attacks you. It's funny because I definitely have a very different perspective. Even though again in these shows it's a little bit more black and white and usually the person they're doing that to is the bad guy. They occasionally touch on like people who are innocent, but like not usually like that. But yeah, I definitely like find myself sometimes watching these shows and wishing for due process, even though it's a fantasy world. And I just think that's kind of really funny. I definitely did not have that perspective when I watched these shows when I was younger, but like now, yeah, just knowing a little bit more about how things work. I believe in due process and I believe in warrants and I believe in lots of proper and legal techniques. So yeah, that's kind of everything I'm watching right now. I am kind of, I feel like on a 1970s film kick. So I plan on, I don't know, seeing what else is on all my different subscriptions for that. I have been just kind of enjoying watching some classic movies because I've talked about this before. So many of the movies that are out currently are remakes of something, sequels, or live action. Like, I don't know. They're not appealing to me because I usually think the first version is the best version. So yeah, I'm just kind of working my way through some classics and I've been really enjoying that. Which reminds me, my local theater, I think once a month or maybe even once a week, they show a film from like an archive. So I should get back into looking into what they're playing because yes, I'm definitely right now finding myself enjoying older movies. I mean, I'm also always sometimes shocked at how old some of these movies are. Like, I don't think of Jaws as being 50 years old, so it was wild to me that it was 50. Even Secrets of Moon Acre, that movie came out in like 2008 and it very much feels like it could have come out today. Actually, it's arguably visually better and better costumed than a lot of what comes out today. Even though, again, I don't know, I hated the characters in it and I thought the writing and acting and everything else about it was kind of bad. If you have like kind of more classic movies that are available on Netflix, Hulu, Peacock, Paramount, I have a lot of these things through like various friends that one of us pays. Give me your recommendations. I have been, like I said, really enjoying kind of, I do plan on, right now what's on my list is I would like to see Virgin Suicides. I've never seen it. And a lot of these movies I know I'm watching like reference parts of it or like it started certain movements. So that's on my list right now. So I need to see if that's on anything. And then I have like a pretty big list of things that I'd like to watch, but I'll have to pay the rental fee and that's not what I really want to spend my money on right now. So I'm just going to continue to work on what is available with the things that I already pay for and or password share with other folks. So with that, I've only started on the hem. So yeah, I still have quite a bit of hand sewing to do. I finished up the waistband. We'll do the hem, and then I will put my attention to the buttons, which I don't really enjoy sewing buttons. So sewing 8 is not particularly exciting, but there's part of sewings that everyone loves and everybody like hates. Like, everybody has their different feelings about different parts of sewing, so I will persevere. But I think that's gonna probably be it for today. I could maybe start the shirt later. We'll see how I'm feeling. I might also just want to be a vegetable, so we'll see. And then my next step here is just to run some fray check into the buttonholes. I find in general buttonholes look a lot nicer when you do fray check, and you don't get as many of like kind of some of the weird thread snags you can get. And now it is time to move on to the top, which is usually the most complicated piece, but it felt pretty straightforward this time. I'm just starting like always by putting in my darts, getting those all sewn up. And then I am using these strips again to interface the collar. The collar is a little bit wider than the interfacing, so I'm actually going to cut it down a little bit, which I think is totally fine. I think that's also a lot easier than like pulling out a big thing of interfacing and cutting from that. And I didn't notice like that there's like any weird buckling happening in the collar because I was able to get these close enough to each other. So I was pretty pleased with this method. And this shirt has again like a fold over facing. That's how it works. I have to get a clean edge on that facing, of course, which is what's happening here. And here I am doing the side seam pinning. I am pinning at both the shoulders and the side seams because that's where I need to be for the next step in this project. And then the sleeves for these are also a fold over facing, so I'm real quick finishing the edge of the seams so that way I can press them in as the facing for the sleeve, which you can see a lot clearer here when I'm pressing it. See, they're like kind of open and folded. And to make the lining make sense here, I'm gonna actually have to trim down the lining quite a bit, so that way there's not like just like a random bunch of lining in there, because obviously I didn't need the fold over part of the sleeve for the lining because it's being covered by the facing that is done in the printed fabric. And here it is time to turn my collar. I'm just using a tool to get really crisp edges. I feel like I've just gotten so much better at turning things and understanding how to get a good turn. For me, my key is to cut corners, as in like not skip steps, but to literally cut where the corners are so there's as little bulk there as possible. And then just in general, trim down my seam quite a bit. The seam where that is not going to get a lot of stress in a garment, or it shouldn't. So it's okay to just kind of be a little less weird about it. And then the next step is to pin together everything at the neckline. This is kind of weird because I have both a facing and a lining. It was kind of strange to figure out because I have to make sure the facing goes over the lining, so when you turn it, it's not under the lining. So it was just kind of figuring out exactly how things would fold and unfold and all of that good stuff. But I knew I would be really happy with the results, and it was worth it to put in the extra steps to figure this out because obviously the instructions don't call for lining, so I'm kind of on my own here. And then once that is sewn and I'm happy with it, because I will say with collars like this, I always end up with some weird tucks. So I end up resewing a couple sections just to make sure everything, I'm going to have weird tucks in here. And so I just want to make sure they're where I want them to be, which is usually on the underside of the collar instead of being on the collar itself. But after that, I'm actually going to use my pinking shears to trim down the seam for understitching. I saw this tip on TikTok and I wanted to see if it got me a better understitch on such a curve, because they kind of said it almost works both as trimming your sleeves and then also kind of clipping them in a way. So I thought it was worth a shot. I don't know that I saw a difference, but I think it could go either way, and I think I'll probably try it again. But here I am doing that actual understitching. And then I am sticking in my final label. And then the instructions call for you using a bias tape to do the hem, but because I've done the lining, my plan is to press this up a little bit and then press the lining up like about 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch more than I've pressed this up, and then slip stitch them together. And here I'm also making sure my sleeves, like everything pins correctly so the lining doesn't cause any weird bagging or pulling or tugging on the outside. This is always a little bit of like finessing because you've basically gotten all your 2D plate pieces into 3D pieces, and now you have to see how they're actually going to sit on your body. But once all the pins are in and all around, I can focus on some other things. It's looking good. The lining's looking good. I'm feeling pretty happy with it, and I think the lining was the right call here. I am basically slip stitching all the way around this entire piece. The only part I'm not slip stitching is the part of the collar that the facing didn't cover, because that's just finished by the fact that I did the lining. And then I'm throwing on my buttonholer. I think I didn't somehow get any footage of me sewing on the buttons, I chose these really cute glass strawberry buttons that I thought complemented this pattern a lot. I don't know how well you can see how poorly the pockets are working for me here. I just don't quite have enough volume in the hips to allow me to have a pocket that doesn't pull the seam open weird. Like if you look to the side, it's looking bulky, it's looking weird. So I'm actually going to take out the pockets. So what I'm doing here is I'm very first just pinning down the stitch line, and then I'll sew down the stitch line here, which is in just the printed fabric. And then I am unpicking the pockets. So here's the thing. I am a huge fan of pockets. It does annoy me when a project doesn't have a pocket, but also I know that I don't like how this looks on me and how the lines hit on me with the pockets in it. So I would rather sacrifice the pockets and actually want to wear this and carry a purse than have pockets in it and not feel confident and good in it. I am sad that I took out the pockets and that I felt like I had to do that, but my only other option was to do a bunch of recutting and figuring out how to get me a lot more like swish in the hips, which is just like not the design of the pattern in general. The pattern isn't supposed to have pockets. That's kind of where I landed, and I know it's disappointing. At the end of the day, I need a garment that I feel good in. And then here is me pressing that final seam. First, I'm actually pressing it closed because it got so funky with all the pocket stuff. So I'll press it open after. And with that, we are ready for the reveal. I'm so excited to show you the set. I hope you enjoyed the reveal. As always, very fun to find a location, to film at, and do all of that good stuff. But as always, I have my 3 final segments. I have cost breakdown, I have final project thoughts, and then I have my hope help segment. So first, we're going with budget. This was not the most affordable project for a few different reasons. First, the fabric cost me $89.36. That includes the cotton lawn that I used as lining, as well as the cotton lawn that is fruit printed. This printed cotton lawn was a kind of more on the expensive side, especially for cotton, but I knew this was a fabric that I would love and that I would wear a ton, so I was okay with that when I purchased it. Notions, when you make 3 pieces, notions is just gonna be a lot higher because you need a lot of zippers and buttons, interfacing and all that good stuff. So that came to a total of $14.09. Oh, and a lot of thread. And then the last thing that really added to the expense was the pattern. Playsuit patterns like this from the 40s are always pretty expensive, so the pattern for this was $42.39. This brings us to a total cost of $145.84. This feels pretty expensive. I will say though, it is 3 pieces that I can get a lot of different modular wear out of, so I mean it comes out to about $50 a piece, which is actually not terrible when you think about it that way. But yes, definitely not a cheap project. And then we get to, of course, the labor. I always like to talk about labor here on this channel, both because the labor that you and I have is valuable, and as much as the people who are above us and make billions and billions of dollars like us to forget that our labor is valuable, it is valuable. But also, a lot of garment workers are either underpaid or in forced labor. A lot of the fast fashion you see that are at those crazy prices are because someone somewhere is not getting paid adequately. No one is getting paid adequately anywhere anymore, but like we're talking about completely unlivable poverty wages. Let's talk about how long this took me to make. Of course, this is not a one-to-one on a factory setting. It's just a way to get you thinking a little bit more about the effort that gets put into making your clothes. Cutting for this took 1.5 hours. Sewing took 10 hours, and then hand sewing took 2 hours and 15 minutes. We're kind of pivoting. This is like the same hours in different format. The skirt took me 5 hours and 15 minutes to make, so this one took me the longest. The shorts only took me 4 hours to make. Shorts, pants, all of them, they're really quite quite easy to make if you aren't doing like a whole bunch of modifications. And then the top took me 4.5 hours. So basically the total this took me was 13 hours and 45 minutes. I multiply that by a living wage here in Seattle, which is $35.39, which is a labor total cost of $486.61. My printer did a really bad job on this, so bear with me. I might end up popping in a different number here, but that brings me to a grand total of $632.45 if I wanted to sell this to get my costs back as well as my labor costs back. Quite expensive. We're talking designer at this point with this. I'm pretty happy with my supply cost. I made something I really like. I know I'll get a lot of good use out of this garment, and I've already worn them out, and they just make me feel so fun. That is the whole breakdown on all of this. I have all the garments here. I have the shirt and both of the bottoms, the shorts and the skirt. So let's break down them all. We'll go one by one. The shirt, I always forget this. So technically, when I try on like bras from the time, I feel like I'm more like a B cup, even though today I am a D cup in today's bras. But then it's always really interesting when I sew up stuff like this because it's a little short in the front. When I make this again, I'm going to lengthen the front by probably about an inch because we start to get into underboob territory when I'm like moving around and doing all that good stuff. And that's like not quite my ideal. I am not a nip slip kind of girl. I have nothing against people who are, but I am not. So yes, I definitely in the future will just drop that line by about an inch, and I think that will fix all of my needs. The back felt fine. Otherwise, I think this actually fits really quite well. It's really cute, and I also think it's fun. I think I could use it as like a little bolero potentially with other things, and I'm pretty happy with the craftsmanship overall. So I accidentally almost matched the patterns. You can see I have like kiwi, lemon, blueberry, which I think is kind of funny because that was definitely not intentional. I am not someone who cares that much about matching patterns, especially on a pattern like this. So I think that's really funny. For the skirt and the shorts, we'll talk about the skirt first. I really like the skirt. I've worn it on its own. I will say it's a little bit too loose. I feel like skirts, I'm still trying to figure out exactly what the right measurement is for me with a skirt. So it's a little bit loose, so I am thinking about, you can put in like just like little bits of elastic, give it a little bit more flexibility maybe in the back. So I'm thinking about doing that. We'll see. I'll also try wearing it a couple more times and see if I feel like maybe it was the way I was wearing it when I was wearing it all day. But yeah, I like the pleating. Of course, I like the pattern. Like, I think this works really well. I really adore the like strawberry buttons that I added. I'm pretty happy with this. And then for the shorts, I think the shorts are really cute. I will say, I think these dinky little pleats are not for me. I think when I make this again in the future, I'm just gonna deepen these pleats. I think this pleat would be so much cuter. Right now, it's probably like 3/4 of an inch, 1/2 an inch. They're not very big pleats in general. I think this would be a lot cuter if you went with a much deeper, almost more like 1.5 inch pleat. I think it would be a lot more cute. I think it would look better on my body. I think it would look better with my curves. So that is my thoughts on these. And then I was bummed that because of the lines of these clothing, I had to take out the pockets, but I am ultimately really glad with the decision. I would have not felt confident or good wearing these with the pockets gapping out and doing the weird things they were doing. Even though I'm bummed to not have pockets in these pieces, they definitely ended up more wearable without the pockets. That's always something to consider. Every once in a while you try something, you go off stripped, it doesn't work. And luckily these weren't too big of a deal to take back out. Yep, next time I make this, deeper pleats. The lining on the shorts worked. I feel like everything worked. The shorts fit. Everything was good overall. So that is kind of my thoughts on the project. I feel like I'm in a pretty decent sewing groove. Let's talk hope helps, especially in a country where things are not feeling very hopeful or optimistic right now. I am alarmed each and every day of what I'm seeing in the news. So this is to, again, kind of focus us, give us some energy so we can continue to resist, just have hope and not feel completely exhausted. This is not an invitation to tune things out and only listen to good news, but it is an invitation to practice the act of hope, which in and of itself is an act of resistance. So I wanted to talk about kind of some overarching trends that I am seeing. So this is old news by now, especially since it's already old news when I'm filming it, and then I'm filming this like a few weeks before it even comes out. But as we all saw in the New York elections, Zohran Mamdani beat out Andrew Cuomo, even though Cuomo had 12 $12.5 million of corporate funding. That he was still over to beat him, and it's a really, really big deal. And it made me think about, I talked about this towards the beginning of the year, but when in Seattle, the proposition for affordable housing by using a tax on wealthy people passed, despite the fact that corporate backers had really backed feeding or taking the teeth out of that tax and out of that program. So what do these two things have in common? The people won instead of corporations. My biggest struggle personally with the Democratic Party is how much lobbyist and corporate money they take. It takes a lot of the teeth out of their policies, and it makes them a lot less electable, in my opinion. These are all my opinions, because they don't care about our interests at all either. They care about the corporations and the lobbyists that pay them. And so that's like a consistent frustration for me in politics, is how much corporations are allowed to pour into elections on both sides of the aisle. This is a bipartisan issue. And like, I'm not ever going to say the Democrats are as bad as the Republicans, but I am also not going to delusionally say that they're great either. So the two things I'm talking about are both Democratic strongholds, right? New York and Seattle are both considered fairly progressive cities. You're asking me, Haley, why do I care? I live in a state or in a city where we don't have any progressive candidates at all. Here's why I think these wins matter, is these wins to me show a national pattern of people being fed up with the money in politics and listening to what candidates say and how candidates are given money and all of that good stuff. Mondami is like a very, very personable guy, but he also talked a lot about how he was actually going to help these small business, how he was actually going to help a New Yorker and a renter and things like that, versus like kind of these overarching promises that Democrats tend to make. And I think that was really successful. It's really actually quite hard to be as progressive as he is and win those primaries because you're up against all of that funding. The fact that the Democratic Party is literally so in like a blah blah blah, I don't know, like kerfuffle, I don't know if that's even the word I'm looking for, but they're very like concerned about the fact that he won the New York primary and what it says about the party. To me, it shows the party moving more in a for the people direction. Like, the problem to me with the Democratic Party is very much they do not feel like they're a party for the people either, which again, I am not saying Republicans are. I'm not saying Republicans are good. You've been on this channel, you know my thoughts on that, but I do think it is a problem to have a company that is so owned by corporations and that doesn't seem to actually fight for the common people as much, even though of course they are not as harmful for us as a Republican leadership. So yeah, I'm feeling hope that I think people are starting to kind of see through the bullshit of the money of politics, and there is a lot of energy around candidates who are not corporately funded. I think that's a great sign. Oh, I was saying, why is this relevant to you if you are not in a progressive city? This is relevant because it's really easy to look at progressive cities from the outside and say, wow, those cities are so progressive and so amazing and so blah, blah, blah. We have a serious issue in these cities with corporate politics and like money and money flowing into our political systems. I will say Amazon, Microsoft, Google own most of the politicians in the city through various things that they do, and it is a problem. And they also like regularly use all of their money and put all of their backing to go against bills that would actually help your normal everyday people by taxing those corporations more and making them pay their fair share of tax. It seems like it wouldn't be an uphill battle for a candidate like Mondami to win, or for Seattle to pass a wealth tax that helps build affordable housing. That seems like that wouldn't be hard, but because of that money in the politics, it is actually really quite challenging, and I think it is a very good thing that we're seeing these things happen. We're seeing some shift in local politics that I think is very exciting. We're not just seeing it in Seattle, clearly. New York City, like, places are hungry for it, and I think it's a really good thing. And again, I try to think about like big picture, zoomed out thinking as well as thinking local. I think you have to think about both, and I think seeing all of these energy against people who are running who are actually for the people is a really great thing. Now we're gonna kind of pivot from this, but this is going live, I believe, August 1st, and Seattle local elections are on the 5th for the primaries. Please go out and vote in these Seattle primaries. We have some really candidates on the ballot, and we also have a really amazing candidates on the ballot as well. And hopefully we can see a lot more progressive wins here in Seattle, and I can continue to find hope in that. Seattle does this really also cool thing. I think we're going to be too late by the time you see this for you to use your Democratic vouchers, but use them in the future. And I just want to talk about this program as well because it's something that does give me hope every time I get to use it. The Democracy Voucher Program in Seattle is a program where residents all get mailed these vouchers that then they can choose to use to sponsor a candidate, and the candidate gets a certain money per voucher from the city. And by signing up to be a part of the Democracy Voucher program, they agree to kind of follow a lot of different rules that are really, really good for keeping corporations out of politics. Through this policy, we've seen a lot more marginalized people end up in politics. It gives the ability for politicians to run without having to court these big donors because they can get these democracy vouchers. And it just really helps keep corporate money out of politics. I believe I think it was Oakland just recently passed a program like it. And I believe LA and San Diego are kind of eyeballing this type of program. I think this type of program is great. It definitely helps people who maybe normally don't have the money to run for government positions. So that is something that also gives me hope every time I get to spend my democracy vouchers. I get so excited about it. I text everybody. I say, use your democracy vouchers, because I think it's something like only 8% of residents do. And it's a really, really great way, especially to give working class people the ability to run for office. That's often who is getting my ballot money, is people who rent and ride the bus and are just like normal people running for government because they want to make life better for normal people, as opposed to corporate shills, which is currently very heavily what our public office feels like in Seattle. Again, primary vote is August 5th. I know a lot of you who watch me are here in Seattle. You guys see me, you say hi, I know you live here. I am asking you to please, please, please vote in your local primaries. Before you all tune out who are not in Seattle, I encourage you to also be active in your local primaries. 100 votes can make a difference, and it's a lot easier to change 100 people's mind than the millions you'd have to change on a national level. And also, a lot of you guys ask me how I would go about finding community in certain places, and if I was to move to a red state, you would see me signing up to campaign for whatever Democratic challengers come through that area, because you're going to meet other people there who, while you might not be fully aligned on your politics, they're people who care and generally sit more on the side of politics with you. And it's like really nice because there's an end date, because there's an end of primaries. So it's a great way to get involved with your local politics. Likely you will be depressed. Likely your candidate will not win. I think being involved in your local politics really helps you get plugged in. I'm plugged in a lot in Seattle, so I'm not currently involved in local politics, although I have friends who are. I have thought about giving like my web design services to candidate, but I couldn't quite get it together this year. But it's something I'm thinking about in the future, because again, I like that it's a volunteer opportunity that has an end date. And I think I would meet a lot of people who again are like active. I feel like people who I find really motivating to be around are people who are really active in doing something in their communities, and politics is a great place to find them, volunteering for campaigns. I used to volunteer to, it wasn't even campaign specific, I used to volunteer to talk to strangers in the street about if they're voting or not. I think it's a great way to get involved, even though like go in with like your heart steeled, because they're pretty brutal affairs, but I think you'll meet people who you can find community with after the election's over, regardless of the outcome. But yeah, that's kind of everything. I hope this was actually hopeful. Again, I know it's hard. It's really hard to feel hopeful right now. Like, I am not going to lie to you. I was just trying to find something that was kind of a bigger overarching theme that made me feel hopeful, as opposed to kind of some of these more tiny little news stories that make me feel hopeful, although there's plenty of those out there. I truly believe there are so many reasons for hope. And I would just encourage you to continue to hold on to hope, to keep yourself motivated and keep yourself moving. Because I do. I believe there's hope, even though things are really, really, really dark right now. And we're seeing both citizens and non-citizens be kidnapped and put in these horrific camps. I'm not delusional. I see what's happening around me. I see what's happening in my community. I see people being ripped away. I still have hope holding on to all of this, but like I also want to say it's really dark and it's really hard out there, and I'm really sorry. And like I know that I have a lot of protection and privilege for living where I live. I don't know, just know that you're not alone and that I see you, and plenty of community members on this channel see you as well. And I truly believe we'll get through this. So yeah, sorry, didn't mean to get emotional there. It's definitely been a really tough month news-wise and everything I've been seeing. Also, want to give a shout out to the tow truck drivers in LA that are following ICE around and towing their cars. I never thought I'd be rooting for tow truck drivers, but here I am cheering them on. I see so many really, really beautiful community efforts happening around this, but I can't lie to you guys and say I'm not scared, and I'm not scared for me. I'm safe, but I'm really scared for a lot of the people that I love. I see it, and like, we can all do what we can, and us speak out. Don't let those people, don't let it happen to them alone. Don't let them not be heard. Talk about it, talk about them, talk about what's happening, but also keep hope and belief that We're gonna get through this and we're gonna win at the end of the day because I truly believe we will. Sorry, that was a bit of a devolve. I was trying to stay bright, but like I am gonna be real with you guys. It's really hard right now. But I really appreciate you all. As always, you can support this channel by commenting down below, giving it a thumbs up. Wow, it feels really, really weird to give this spiel right after that. If you're new here, subscribe and stick around. I talk about all of these things all of the time, and I really care about this community online and continuing to bring you guys hope and also some creativity and fun things as well. Thank you, and I will see you next week in my video, which will be a little different. I'm taking you through what a week of being a full-time job person, full-time corporate person, as well as a content creator looks like for me. So I will see you then. Bye.